How can this $10 kitty wading pool be the answer to one of your gardening problems? Let me tell you about it. Hey y'all. So there's a problem that I know a lot of us gardeners face, and the other day I saw the most brilliant solution to this problem, and it is simple, and I want to share it with you. So for me personally, I pick up a lot of plants as I come across them, especially if they are a good deal for areas that I plan to create new garden beds. So right now we're kind of slowly adding the garden beds, but I do have plans kind of roughly drawn up, and then of course plans in my head about where we're going to add more plants and trees and shrubs. And so when I come across that perfect plant that I know I want to use in an area that either it's a good deal or it's hard to find, I usually go ahead and purchase it. It may not be the smartest way to do things because there are occasions where I lose the plant, whether I forget to water it or something, but it has been the system that works the best for me. But then of course it leaves you with the problem of constant watering because when they're in their nursery containers, of course they dry up a lot faster. But I feel like in the long run, it helps me because I get the plants that I'm wanting, the specific varieties, and usually I can get them at a good deal when I find them like at the end of the season. So I have a lot of plants in waiting. It's like a little mini nursery, and we are constantly having to water, especially in this heat wave. So I was watching Janey's channel on Dig Plant Water Repeat, and her viewer Kathy commented on one of her videos about how they use wading pools for their plants in waiting. And I like light bulb moment. Like, of course, why not? Why hadn't I thought of that as well? So the idea behind it is that you're just filling the wading pool, and then the plants sitting inside of it in their nursery containers will soak up the water that they need to get their soil wet. So you're not having to go around and individually water each plant. You can just fill your wading pool up with water. The plants soak up the water they need. It's a win-win. But I want to take it one step farther, and I am going to add irrigation. So I have irrigation on our property and on a timer, and I am going to add irrigation to the wading pool, put my plants inside the wading pool, and then that way I don't even have to worry about getting out first thing in the morning or checking them in the afternoon or whenever. It can be a totally hands-off way to keep my plants in waiting watered. I think this will be great just on a daily basis, especially in these heat waves we've been having. And then also if you travel and go out of town, that way you can just kind of throw your pots in there or any of your plants in waiting, have it hooked up to irrigation. So with adding irrigation, my thought is that when my irrigation goes off, it just fills the pool, plants soak it up, and we're good to go. So hopefully it works the way I'm thinking it's going to work. I am going to add an on-off valve on my irrigation tubing, just so that way I can turn it off if I need to, if for whatever chance, for whatever reason I don't have any plants in waiting. Don't foresee that happening because I'm constantly getting new plants, acquiring new plants, but that way I can at least control and turn it off if I get to the point where I don't need the wading pool anymore. So I want to walk you through the steps of setting this up and show you how it's going to work. These are the wading pools that I picked up. These are just the inexpensive plastic wading pools. These two larger ones, I believe, are 49 inches in diameter, and I picked these up at Lowe's. And then this one I found, it's smaller, it's only 36-inch diameter, and I found it at Tractor Supply. So before I show you how to turn this wading pool into an automatic watering system for your plants in waiting, let me go over a couple things to consider before you set yours up. First off, of course, you want to consider the sun. So this is going to be for my plants in shade, morning sun currently, but the more shade-loving plants. You also want to pick a fairly level area of ground. Now, I don't have a really good shady spot that is 100% level, so you can kind of see this spot isn't perfectly level, and the reason that's going to be important is because obviously to the lower spots, the water is going to collect and pool a little deeper. You can use that to your advantage though, because if you do have shade-loving plants that really love to be wet, you could kind of keep them in the deeper areas, and plants that like to dry out a little bit more in your higher elevation. So just something to consider. The other thing to consider is if you don't have in-ground irrigation to tap into, which is what I'm going to do, you can use a hose just from your spigot on a timer and just put the hose in the pool on a timer, and it'll fill for however long you need it to. You can also use and set up drip irrigation to an outdoor spigot. So that's another option. So you want to consider your water source, consider the area that you're going to put it in, and then let's get down to the nitty gritty of how we actually set it up. So first thing I want to do is I want to drill some holes that I'm going to run my irrigation tubing into. That way it's not draped over the edge. If you were using something like a hose that's heavier and has more weight to it, it could probably just lay on top, sit inside the pool and not have an issue. But because I'm using the 1/4 inch like spaghetti tubing for the drip irrigation, when it turns on and pressurizes, it could just kind of wiggle out of the pool, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to drill holes in through the sides of the pool, and that's where I'm going to run my tubing. So I wouldn't want this to just fill up with water and be all the way to the top and my plants just constantly sitting in water. So you are going to have to kind of play around with the amount of water that you're filling it and how often, especially when if you're going to set it up on a timer type system. If you're hand watering and just putting your plants in the wading pool, you can just see, how often you need to water based on how quickly the plants are soaking it up. More plants, deeper water, less plants, less water, right? Obviously, I'm going to play around with the length that the irrigation is running, the volume that I'm using on my drip tubing, just to make sure that I'm kind of getting the right amount. So it's going to take a little playing around and troubleshooting initially, but I think once I get the system, the timing, the amount of emitters and everything figured out exactly for my area, it'll just be kind of like a hands-off way to keep these plants watered. So for me, my drip irrigation is going to be coming in from over here where I have some drip irrigation running. That's where I'm going to tie it into and connect it. So I think I'm just going to drill probably 3 holes on this side to run the tubing in. And I'm just using a regular drill bit, and I'm making sure that it's big enough that my 1/4 inch tubing can get through, but not so big that the emitters themselves could fall through the hole. All right, I have my holes drilled. Next, I'm going to run my tubing through the holes. Hi, future Joanna here as I'm editing. While you have your drill out, go ahead and drill some holes on the side of the pool for drainage in case you get excess rainfall. I went back and did this and forgot to make note. I did about 3 1-inch diameter holes, all about 1.5 inches from the bottom. All right, back to the video. For supplies, I have my irrigation pipe cutter. I have my 1/4 inch distribution drip tubing. This is the drip tubing that does not have any emitter holes on them. Now there is several ways you could do this. You could use drip tubing that has the emitter holes and lay it in the pool. I mean, you could run your 1/2 inch tubing through the holes. It's really just kind of whatever you have, supplies you have on hand and works best for your situation. For me, I have the 1/2 inch distribution tubing on the other side of these arborvitaes, and I'm just going to tap in and use this 1/4 inch distribution tubing to run through these holes and then connect my emitters. Now the other supplies you need, I'm going to use a 4-way 1/4 inch connector. That way I can run 3 different tubings, connect them to a single that runs back into the main supply of my 1/2 inch tubing. I am going to go with 2-gallon per hour emitters on the end of my tubing. Based on how often I run this zone, I run it daily for 30 minutes. So using, just doing math, that would put about, these are 2 gallons each, running for 3 minutes, or 30 minutes, I'm sorry, would put about 3 gallons of water in this pool, which I'm going to have to play around with, but I feel like based on the amount of plants that I'll have in here, I think that's a good way to start and to begin and see how much that works. I might have to swap them out for maybe change one of the 2-gallon emitters to a 1 gallon or a 1/2 gallon. I can kind of play around with it based on how much water they're using. So first step, I'm going to take one of my single 1/4 inch drip connectors, and this, I'm going to put my 1/4 inch tubing on this side, and then this side will connect into my 1/2 inch distribution tubing that's on the other side of these arborvitae. So my first step is I'm going to connect my 1/4 inch distribution tubing here. And now I'm going to go tap this into the 1/2 inch tubing, run it all the way over here, and measure my length before I cut it. This is my 1/2 inch irrigation tubing. All I'm going to do is poke a hole And then here I'm just going to connect, this is my 1/4 inch drip tubing with the single connection into the main line. So now that it's connected, we're going to go on the other side, measure the length that we need, and then cut it. I'm going to cut it right about here. And then I'm going to add my 4-way connector. So remember, this is our supply coming off the 1/2 inch tubing. So this is going to supply all the water. And then at this point, we're going to split it into 3 different tubings. So now that I have one on where my holes are, I'm going to measure the length of tubing that I need from this point before I cut it. So I'm just going to run this tubing through the hole that I drilled. I'm going to cut it. And I am going to secure my emitter on the other side. And that way, because of the size hole I drilled, it can't pull out completely. So I don't have to worry about the irrigation tubing coming out of the wading pool. And now I'm just going to repeat the same process for the other 2 connections on my 4-way splitter. Connecting my next one. Connecting my emitter. For another look at how it's all connected, remember this 1/4 inch tubing there is connected to my main distribution line. I have it split so that it goes 3 ways, and then all 3 are connected to a 2 gallon per hour emitter on the side of the wading pool. I'm going to turn on my irrigation and test it and see how quickly it fills up. I just turned the irrigation on. Right now this is running once a day in the mornings for about 30 minutes. I'm going to let it run and see how long and how much water we get in this amount of time. It's been running for about 10 minutes now, and you can kind of see we're maybe at a 1/2 inch in most areas. This little higher edge is still dry, so I'm going to see where it finishes at when it runs for the full 30 minutes. And now about 20 minutes in, we've got a nice deep, about 1 inch deep all the way across. And here we are at the end of 30 minutes. It is at least 1 inch deep all around, maybe 1.5 inches in some areas. I think this is going to be perfect. And then, of course, if you find that you're getting too much water, change the emitters that you're using, how long it runs, or you can also just drill additional drain holes lower down so that once it gets to a certain volume, it just drains out the sides. But I think the most water conscious way would be to just adjust the amount your emitters are putting out or how long your irrigation is running for. But I'm going to start with this and see how well my plants like it. The last step in setting this all up is adding my on-off valves. Now these are 1/4 inch drip tubing on-off valves. They're kind of hard to find, to be honest. At least in my area, I got a pack of these at Lowe's last summer, and I think I got like 20, about a couple packs of them. And these are great to use for anytime you're running drip to any of your pots, because I don't know, if you're like me, sometimes your pots are full, sometimes they're not, early in the spring or late in the fall. There's times where you don't have anything in your containers, and so you can turn the drip off, but still have them hooked up to drip. I just find these really useful. I picked up these from our local Lowe's, and I have not seen them available since I found these. I even checked our local irrigation supply store, and they don't have them in stock. But I did find some on Amazon. I will link those in the description below. So I ordered just another pack of those to refill my supply, because these are my last 2 of the ones I found at Lowe's. But they're really handy. So the easiest way to connect them is once I have everything all set up. All I do is I'm going to snip this 1/4 inch drip tubing anywhere along the line. It doesn't really matter where. You can do it, wherever you're going to have the easiest access to get to the on-off valve. So for me, This whole tubing setup is going to stay above the mulch just because of the way that I have it. And obviously I haven't mulched yet, but once I do mulch, it'll be on top of the mulch. And so I can get back here and just turn it on and off. So I'm going to clip just right about here. And then it does have an arrow on it. So it shows you the direction at which the water flows for on. And I'm going to just connect one end and the other end. Just like that. So now I have my valve in this position. It will flow. If I need to turn it off for whatever reason, you know, especially if we're getting a lot of rainfall and I don't need the irrigation to run, I can just turn it off and then turn it back on whenever I need it. I'm at the back of the property now, back by our shed. This is where we keep primarily the trees, the large trees and shrubs that we're waiting to be planted. And right now I have quite a big load because I've been acquiring plants for our future woodland garden, which is going to be on the north side of our house around a fire pit. And as I come across those like really awesome trees or shrubs that I really want, I pick those up. So I thought I would go ahead and set up the wading pools here for them. It's kind of in the back of our property, out of view. You know, the downside to these is that they are not the most attractive things. But we did go ahead and when we had irrigation run throughout the property, we had an irrigation zone set up for around the shed because eventually this shed will have beds around it. It's going to be beautiful garden beds one day, but it is kind of low on the priority list right now. And I am going to make this eventually like my potting shed, potting garden area. So we went ahead and had it plumbed for irrigation, but nothing currently is set up on irrigation. So these two pools all by themselves will be on this one zone. So I don't have to worry about the length of time that it's running as much. I can kind of just gauge based on exactly how much these plants are needing. So these are the bigger pools. I tried to find the two most level spots. So bear with me, it's not the prettiest part of our property right now, but I went ahead and drilled my holes. I don't know if you can see them in there, but I went ahead and drilled the holes that will hold the tubing in place. And then I have the other one over here. So step one is I'm just going to tie into our plumbing with my 1/2-inch distribution tubing. This is my 1/2-inch distribution or supply line. And all of our irrigation has been plumbed to already have the connectors, and they've all been tested and made sure there's no leaks as far as the plumbing goes. So I'm just going to connect this in here. And then because nothing else is going to be running on this 1/2-inch tubing, I needed, let me grab it, to go ahead and make sure the other end of the tubing is clamped off. So I just have one of the figure 8 clamps at the end. So that way the water is all going to stay just in this tubing. All right, I have my 1/4-inch tubing. I'm just going to connect my single connector. Right now, just poke a hole in my 1/2-inch tubing and connect my 1/4-inch. So the same setup as last time. I am just going to cut it, connect my 4-way connector, and then connect each of my 3 tubings that are going to go inside the pool to fill it. Now I'm going to start with the 2-gallon per hour emitters on this setup as well. And then the last step is connecting my on-off valve. So again, just connect it in the direction of the arrow for flow of water. Each end is in place. That's it. All right, let's test this and make sure it works. The irrigation system is on and running. Oh, isn't it awesome when things work properly? And I'm going to show you while it's on that these little 1/4-inch valves work, and it can hold the pressure and turn it off. Let's see, just turn the valve off and there's nothing coming out. Turn it back on Works great. All right, let's set up this last pool. Just turned the system back on to test this pool. They're all working. It's great. So I'm gonna let these fill up and I'm gonna add my plants. And like I said, it's just gonna kind of be a watch and see how much water they use and adjust, you know, my emitters and or how long it runs for. But both of them are working. This is gonna save a lot of time in the long run. Wanted to show you how things ended up. So my plants have now been soaking in here for about an hour, and I am seeing that it's definitely more than enough water for them. So you don't, I would say an hour to 2 hours is the max you would want water sitting in here, just because beyond that you can start to get root rot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to empty this out because they have been soaking in here for an hour and they're plenty wet. The soil's moist. And I'm going to, you know, now I know that this is too much water. I cannot adjust the run time because the rest of my plants that are on this zone need it to run for 30 minutes. But what I can do is decrease either the volume that the emitters or just, you know, go down to one emitter. But I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to swap all of the red 2 gallons per hour emitters. I'm going to swap them to the half gallon. And so then that would be what, 3/4 of a gallon that it would pump in here in 30 minutes. Am I doing my math right? 1 gallon, a gallon and a half. Yeah. So that would be you know, significantly less volume. And I think that is what this little pool will require. Let's go take a look at the pools with my trees and shrubs. So over here, I have some of my large trees and shrubs. Now, they're kind of packed in there like sardines. So ideally, they would be spaced out more than this because they need more airflow. So it's kind of a temporary solution for me right now. I'm going to pick up some more of these pools. And some of these are going to get planted out sooner than later. So just take note, I would space them out a little bit more than this. Do as I say, not as I do. But you can see this I had run for about 40 minutes and they're sitting in a lot less water, mainly because they have bigger root balls. There's more plants packed in there. So they're soaking up this water and they've only been in there, it's only been about 30 minutes. So I'm going to let this go a little bit longer, probably another hour, and see how much water they soak up. And then I can make adjustments based on that. So I'd say while this is a really easy hands-off way to take care of your plants in waiting, I wouldn't say it's 100% hands-off because you are going to have to monitor if you get a ton of rain. You don't want them sitting in, you know, rain for an extended period of time. So you might have to dump some water out. You know, and of course mosquitoes could breed if they're standing water, that sort of thing. But it's meant to just kind of help you, especially during the summer, the heat, when normally you're out there watering the nursery containers, you know, twice a day, morning and night, just to kind of take that weight off your shoulders. So I am going to still keep a close eye on them, adjust the amount that the irrigation runs, adjust the emitters based on what they need. But I think this is just going to take a lot more stress, a lot more weight off my shoulders of trying to keep extra plants alive. You'd think I'd learn my lesson and just stop buying plants, but I know you guys can relate to me on that. Anyways, I hope this helps you. Let me know if you set up your own little irrigation waiting pool for your plants in waiting. I think it's a really cool thing, really cool idea. And we have Kathy to thank for the idea. I'm going to tag her in the description. Make sure that you tag her if you do it and thank her for coming up with this idea. I don't know where she got it, but it's brilliant. It's so smart. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for gardening with me today.